The Germans called it the Iron Wasp, and when you saw one, you had about 5 seconds to live. This tiny American Jeep with a massive tank gun strapped to it would appear out of nowhere, unleash absolute hell, and vanish before you could blink. German soldiers feared it more than tanks, more than bombers, because you never saw it coming until it was too late. This is that story, and it's absolutely wild.
Yo, what's up, history buffs? Today, we're diving into one of the most badass stories from World War II that doesn't get nearly enough airtime. We're talking about the time when American soldiers said screw it and decided to strap massive tank machine guns onto their Jeeps. And guess what? The Germans were so freaked out by these things that they gave them a special name, the Iron Wasp. Now, if you know anything about Germans and their love for over-engineering stuff, you know that when they give something a nickname, it's because that thing is absolutely wrecking their day. So buckle up, because this story is straight up wild. First off, let's give some props to the real MVP of World War II, the Willys MB Jeep. This little beast was like the Swiss Army knife of vehicles, lightweight, tough as nails, and could go pretty much anywhere. The Jeep was so clutch that even Eisenhower said it was one of the tools that won the war, no cap. These bad boys were everywhere, from the scorching deserts of North Africa to the muddy hell of the European theater. They hauled supplies, carried wounded soldiers, served as recon vehicles, and yeah, sometimes they even became mobile weapons platforms that would make any mechanic do a double take. So here's the deal. As the war progressed, American forces kept running into situations where they needed more mobile firepower. Sure, they had tanks and armored vehicles, but those things were slow, guzzled gas like crazy, and couldn't navigate narrow European streets or rough terrain as well as Jeeps could. Infantry units often found themselves in sticky situations where they needed serious firepower, and they needed it fast. The standard issue weapons were solid, don't get me wrong, but when you're facing fortified positions or enemy armor, you need something with a bit more oomph, you feel me? Now this is where it gets interesting. American GIs have always had this reputation for being MacGyver-level creative when the situation calls for it. They looked at their Jeeps, then they looked at captured German tank machine guns, specifically the MG-42s and the heavier MG-34s, and somebody said what every great innovation starts with. Hey, you know what would be sick? The MG-42 was no joke, folks. This thing could fire between 1,200 and 1,500 rounds per minute. That's insane. The Germans called it Hitler's boss saw because of the sound it made, a sound that absolutely terrified Allied troops. It was one of the most effective machine guns of the entire war. But here's the kicker. American soldiers also got their hands on even heavier firepower. We're talking about the Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun, and in some cases, they even mounted captured German 20mm anti-aircraft guns. Yeah, you heard that right. Anti-aircraft guns on Jeeps. So these genius soldiers and mechanics started rigging up these weapons on their Jeeps. They'd weld mounting brackets, create makeshift turrets, and basically turn these nimble little vehicles into mobile death machines. The transformation was pretty straightforward, but absolutely brilliant.
They'd reinforce the Jeep's frame to handle the recoil, because, let's be real, these weren't designed to handle that kind of kick. They'd mount the gun either in the rear or sometimes even in the passenger seat area, creating a firing position that could rotate and engage targets in almost any direction. Some units got really fancy and added armor plating, though that was risky because it added weight and the Jeep could barely handle it. The result? A vehicle that could haul ass at 60 miles per hour, navigate terrain that would stop a tank cold, and lay down suppressing fire that would make entire German squads hit the deck. It was guerrilla warfare on 4 wheels, and it was absolutely devastating. Now let's talk about that nickname. The Germans weren't just being poetic here. They called these modified Jeeps Iron Wasp or Iron Wasp, and the name was pretty much perfect. Think about it. Wasps are small, fast, and aggressive. You might not think much of one until it's right up in your face, and then boom, you're in a world of hurt. These Jeep-mounted gun platforms operated the exact same way. They'd zoom in from seemingly nowhere, unleash absolute hell with their devastating firepower, and then bounce before German forces could coordinate a proper response. The psychological impact was huge. German soldiers were used to fighting tanks. Yeah, they were dangerous, but you could hear them coming from a mile away. These Jeeps, though, they were sneaky. They'd use their speed and maneuverability to hit German positions from unexpected angles, cause chaos, and disappear into the landscape. It was hit-and-run warfare at its finest, and it drove the Germans absolutely bonkers. These Iron Wasps weren't just for show. They became crucial assets in multiple combat scenarios. Let me break down some of the ways these things were deployed. Reconnaissance in force. Regular recon was all about staying hidden and reporting back, but sometimes you needed to poke the hornet's nest to see what flew out. Armed Jeeps could engage enemy positions, gauge their strength, and get out before things got too hot. Convoy protection. Supply convoys were juicy targets for German raiders and ambushes. Having a few of these heavily armed Jeeps as escorts made attacking a convoy a way riskier proposition. Any German unit thinking about hitting a supply truck had to deal with the fact that they might take concentrated machine gun fire from multiple angles. Quick reaction force. When a unit got pinned down and needed immediate support, tanks were too slow. These modified Jeeps could respond in minutes, laying down suppressing fire to allow trapped units to maneuver or evacuate wounded. Harassment operations. This is where these babies really shined. Small teams would take these armed Jeeps behind enemy lines, and I mean deep behind enemy lines, to hit supply depots, command posts, and communication centers. The speed meant they could strike and be gone before German forces could mount an effective counterattack. Urban combat. In cities and towns, the Jeep's size was a massive advantage. They could navigate narrow streets and alleys where tanks couldn't go, providing crucial fire support to infantry clearing buildings. Now, let's keep it 100. These things weren't perfect. In fact, using them was pretty dangerous for the crews manning them. First off, there was basically zero protection. Regular Jeeps had no armor to begin with, and while some units added steel plates, it was minimal at best. If you took return fire, you were incredibly exposed. One good burst from an enemy machine gun or a mortar shell landing anywhere nearby, and you were done. The recoil was also a massive issue. These guns weren't designed to be fired from something as light as a Jeep. Extended firing could literally shake the vehicle apart or damage the mounting system. Crews had to be smart about how they used their weapons, short, controlled bursts rather than sustained fire. And then there was the fact that if you got caught by enemy armor or aircraft, you were toast. An armed Jeep might be intimidating to infantry, but it was nothing compared to a German tank or a Stuka dive bomber. The whole strategy relied on speed and surprise. If you lost either of those advantages, things could go south real quick. Here's the thing that really gets me about this whole story. It shows what made American forces so effective during World War II. It wasn't just about having better equipment or more resources. It was about adaptability and innovation at the ground level. Some general in a headquarters didn't order these modifications. This came from soldiers in the field who saw a problem, identified available resources, and created a solution. That kind of bottom-up innovation was happening across the American military during the war, and it gave U.S. forces a serious edge. The Iron Wasp concept influenced vehicle design for decades after the war. Modern military vehicles like the Humvee carry on this tradition, mobile, armed, and versatile. Special operations forces still use the same basic concept, light, fast vehicles with heavy weapons for hit-and-run operations. The psychological aspect can't be overlooked either. The Germans had this reputation for superior tactics and equipment, but here were American soldiers taking their own weapons and using them in ways the Germans never anticipated. That had to mess with their heads. It showed that American forces weren't just going to fight the war on German terms. They were going to innovate, adapt, and bring their own style to the battlefield. These armed Jeeps were just one example of the creative problem-solving that characterized the American war effort.
The same kind of thinking led to things like the Rhino hedgerow cutters that Sherman tanks used to break through the bocage in Normandy, or the proximity fuse that revolutionized anti-aircraft warfare. This is what happens when you give intelligent, motivated people the freedom to experiment and try new approaches. The military brass was smart enough to let soldiers in the field adapt their equipment and tactics to local conditions. That flexibility was absolutely crucial to winning the war. So, there you have it, the story of the Iron Wasp. What started as some creative GIs bolting big guns onto little Jeeps became a genuine tactical innovation that scared the crap out of one of the most formidable militaries in history. It's a reminder that sometimes the best solutions come from the ground level, from people who are actually dealing with problems firsthand. It's about being resourceful, thinking outside the box, and not being afraid to try something unconventional. The Germans might have had their Tigers and Panthers, their blitzkrieg tactics, and their supposedly superior military doctrine, but they were up against American soldiers who could turn a simple Jeep into a weapon system that would earn a fearsome nickname and a place in military history. And honestly, that's pretty dope. The Iron Wasp might not be as famous as the Sherman tank or the P-51 Mustang, but it represents something just as important, the spirit of innovation and adaptability that helped win World War II. These scrappy little vehicles punched way above their class weight and showed that sometimes the best weapon is the one you create yourself. That's the American way, folks. See a problem, grab what you've got, and make it work. No excuses, just results. Peace out, and stay curious about history.